It's the Cheap Chills Show.
Very nice.
And now, here is your host, Ben Walker Story.
Welcome to the Cheap Chills podcast, where artists and creators who love spooky, weird stuff can get together and talk spooky, weird art talk. A few months ago, I was alone in bed watching the Cuphead Show. It's on Netflix. Have you seen it? It's something that I had put on for our son when it came out, but it was too creepy for him, and he went back to watching something about trains with eyes. Anyway, I was blown away by just how good this cartoon was. It's very, very inspired by animation from the 1930s. The animation, the jokes, holy craps, the backgrounds. Now, when the second episode came on, I paid more attention to the credits. Created by Dave Wasson. It was one of those moments where I thought, man, if I could get my podcast going again, maybe I could talk to people like this. A few months later, a few Instagram DMs later, and here we are. You've seen his work on the Mickey Mouse shorts on Disney+. There's Time Squad, Star versus the Forces of Evil, Oh Yeah Cartoons, and the Cuphead Show. Here it is, my conversation with writer and director Dave Wasson. Where are you? Are you in LA?
Yes, I'm just north of Pasadena in a little town called Altadena.
Sure. I've heard of Altadena. I think Conan O'Brien makes fun of it a lot, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, really? That's good. I didn't know it from that, but I love that. I hope that's true.
Yeah, I think his assistant lives there. I'm not sure. But
like Sona?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I'll keep an eye peeled for her.
Yeah. That's how I keep track. It's so hard when you're a Northern California guy to keep track of Southern California, locations.
I'm impressed that you know Altadena, but yeah, that would make sense. Everybody knows Pasadena. Pasadena's famous, but yeah, nobody knows about the sad little stepsister, Altadena.
No, I know Pasadena is nice, but I have not seen Altadena. Did you move out there for the animation business?
Yeah,
or
I grew up in Arkansas and was there through high school and then junior college, and then came out here to go to Cal Arts.
Oh, Cal Arts. Nice. That makes sense.
So yeah, I came out here to do that. And then just, it's like all of the animation business is at that time was in Burbank. So then I, gravitated down south to Burbank, where, it's really weird. It's like Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Disney, even Warner Brothers. I mean, they're all like within maybe like 5 miles of each other, especially if you're talking TV. So it's like you end up working in this really sort of the small town of glorious downtown Burbank. And you're in Northern California. Is that where you're based?
Yeah, I'm in Grass Valley, which is... Did you ever see Better Off Dead?
Yes.
Remember that?
It's been a while, but yeah, I love that movie.
And they were in this fictitious town that was like, they called it a crappy, stop on the way to a ski slope. And it's kind of what it feels like. Because it's like the last sort of bit of civilization until you go through the woods and over the mountain, and then you get to Reno. Yeah, so we're like an hour between Sacramento and an hour between, to Reno.
Okay.
It's a gold mining town.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I like that there's Victorian, architecture everywhere, because that's when all the homes were built.
Uh-huh.
It's got small town vibes, which is going to have its good points and its bad points.
Ah, got it. I bet it's very pretty, though.
It is. It is very pretty. There's a lot of redwoods, and I guess that's about it. Victorians and redwoods. No, but this is where we could get a home. We were in San Francisco for 7 years. I met my now wife there, and we lived together. And then when she got pregnant, we moved. We had to get out of there.
Right. Right. Yeah, that town is a kind of a mystery to me because it's yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, I hope San Francisco uh, gets better. I mean, it's
Yeah.
such an awesome city, but yeah, it sounds like it's really going through some tough times right
Yeah.
now.
I went to art school there for animation at the Academy of Art. And
Oh, great.
I always looked up to San Francisco as being like the land of opportunity, and it's beautiful, but it's also like, oh, you could meet anybody there in any industry.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, my impression of that was like all that, like the what happened in the 60s, where it was like a cultural revolution and like the what was it like Ken Kesey with the electric Kool-Aid acid test.
Yeah.
And then that was like Jerry Garcia and Art and like Robert Crumb, where all those like underground comics guys like kind of came from, and that whole movement came from.
Yeah.
I was a huge, or still am, a huge Robert Crumb fan. I love that guy's stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Zap Comics and that whole group of artists and stuff. That's what I always kind of associated it with. So I always thought it was like this place of like amazing, like an amazing artistic movement that was going on up there. But I guess that's been a while now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's always going to attract that, but as things get more and more expensive, it's hard for people to stay there.
Yeah.
I always felt like people go there with whatever they have in mind, and you have like, it feels like 7 years, like that 7 year itch where either you're gonna stay there forever and go crazy, or you gotta go, you gotta leave and do something else.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
But they have a great comedy scene, and I got into this comedy scene. I tried it myself, and that didn't really work out. But I would do like the posters and stuff for events at Cobb's Comedy Club and stuff. And if you want to do comedy, if you want to get up, they call it, right? You could do that every night.
That's great. I do. Yeah, I feel like there's always a connection between like comedy and animation
Sure.
because yeah, it just feels like those two things are pretty linked in my mind. Because I don't know, almost everybody I know that's in animation is also a huge comedy fan.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I get not to say that all animation is funny, but a lot of it is. That's the stuff that really inspires me. So yeah, I think there's definitely a connection there.
Sure. Is it about timing maybe, or storytelling? And
I think it is. I think it's like it's jokes, it's timing, it's delivery, all that kind of stuff. And most of the people I know that are like in animation, well, maybe not most, but a lot of the people I know in animation are really, really funny people.
sure. I think what's interesting though is that they're very different ways of executing kind of the same thing, of just trying to get a laugh from somebody with something dumb almost. Like, I always admire how stand-ups go up on stage with nothing. They have no physical tools or anything, except their ideas and their voice.
Right.
And it's very instant, whatever they're presenting to people. And then with animation, you want to make somebody laugh with a dumb little joke. You're like, oh, that would be good. Let's spend the next 2 years working on it.
Then yeah, I've heard like, right, people say animation, it's like you tell a joke and then you wait a year to see if anybody laughs.
Yeah. And then you don't even know. It feels like, I mean, I guess with YouTube and social media, you get a little bit more of a read on how people take things. But, as far as like TV, especially, before social media, it seems like you would have no idea really if it's clicking with people or not.
That's right. Yeah. I know like back in the day, like, so when Walt Disney would do, any of these animation studios, they would like Warner Brothers or Disney, they would make a film. And then when they would release it, they would all go to the theater and sit in the back and listen to the people laughs and see what got laughs, what kind of didn't get the laughs that they expected. And then they could make adjustments based on that. But you're right. In TV, it's like you don't get to have that experience. But the thing that's been nice, like you said, with YouTube and that kind of thing, you can at least like, I would just pour over comments and stuff like that on the shorts that I made, because it'd be like when they go like, "Oh, I loved it when Mickey said this," or "Donald did that," you'd be like, "Yes, it worked. Somebody noticed. They noticed that little thing I put in that I was so excited about."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I should say that, I have a son, and he is 7 now. So we've been watching, a lot of cartoons for the last 6 years or so.
Yeah.
But I should say he loved, we both loved the Disney stuff that you were working on, the kind of old timey look.
Right. Oh, that's great. I love your son already. So
we both loved
great
that.
Taste.
Yeah. I mean, it just had like a cool, I felt like, oh, I noticed it. You know what I mean? Like he watches a lot of stuff.
Right.
But I noticed with the Disney shorts, it was like, oh, this has that kind of weird edge that's, not necessarily even dark, but just kind of a weird edge to it that I hadn't seen from Disney in a long time.
Yeah, that was really fun. I think that's been maybe that and Cuphead have probably been like my 2 favorite jobs of all time. And yeah, with those Mickey shorts, when they started it, the Disney really wanted Mickey to be funny, which he really hadn't been in like, 80 years.
Yeah.
It seemed like he was funny, and then he quickly became sort of the company mascot, and they kind of were they got more precious with him and more careful with him. But like on those shorts, they really were like, we want him to be funny. So and it was really great. There was sort of a small team that worked on him. Paul Rudish headed it up, and it was really fun. And they kind of turned us loose, and they liked him, and it was great to see people respond to him too. They were hugely popular. They ended up like putting them on like cruise ships and hotels. Like, I guess if you go to the Disneyland hotel, there's like a channel that just plays those shorts all the time. So it was, and then they built a ride based on those shorts.
Oh, nice.
For Disneyland and for Disney World. So it was nice to see, there's like people like us that grew up watching the theatrical shorts, the Warner Brothers stuff and the old Tex Avery stuff, and even the Fliescher stuff.
Yeah.
And like, we always knew those cartoons were amazing. And I don't know, somehow culture drifted away from that. But I feel like, cartoonists always know that stuff is going to work because it worked then, and it feels so evergreen. So it was nice to like be able to sort of do all the stuff that you loved and have people respond to it.
Yeah, I see what you mean with Mickey. Like, I think to be funny, don't you have to be kind of vulnerable and ridiculous, basically? And when Mickey becomes this like golden figurehead, then you're not allowed to be ridiculous anymore.
Yeah, I think it's like you don't want to. I mean, they let us like kind of like we would, we could kind of like knock him around and stuff, which I think they wouldn't do. But I had one that I did that was the short was called Coned, and Pluto's wearing a cone on his head, like dogs do. He'd been to the vet.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mickey, in order to make him feel better, puts a cone on his head, but he's standing upright, so his vision is blocked. So it was great. It's like you kind of got to do all those. I got to do like all those things that maybe you do with Mr. Magoo, where he just can't see, and so he's crashing into stuff, and he's causing all these other accidents, and he's injuring himself. He's endangering Pluto's life and all the other lives around him. Like, I don't know, that kind of stuff is really fun to me. But I don't think they would have done that back in the 50s. He was too much of a nice guy at that point.
I love that. I mean, most of my storytelling right now is my son needs a makeup story every night.
Oh, that's great.
To go to sleep.
That's great practice, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I didn't realize that it was going to be the kind of practice that it is, but the biggest practice is in like not caring, you know what I mean? Like I get precious about my characters and stuff.
Right.
And then it becomes not interesting or not funny because I want it to be this like lived out fantasy where nothing bad happens, but that's not, that's not a story. So with these makeup stories, it's so often about like coming up with a premise that's so stupid that you couldn't possibly get past the first sentence, but then I just like try to do it anyway.
Yeah, right.
And it's fun when it works out, and it works out more than you'd think, but not always. Sometimes they are super pointless, and I just hope that he's asleep by then,
That is good though. There's a great freedom in not caring as much or not being as precious with something. I know, like when I finally like I had like been at Cal Arts and like done a couple of short films that I'd animated and stuff. But when I got a job in the industry, suddenly, you have a quota of drawings to meet. You're supposed to do, I don't know, whatever it was. I was doing layouts, character layouts, which is kind of rare these days. I don't know if anybody, now they call it special poses, but back then they were actually calling it character layouts, where you would pose out characters for a scene. But suddenly I had like 40 scenes in a week I had to get done. And so, I had to just jam through that stuff. So it's like, you end up like, I don't know, with my own stuff when I was in school, I'd be like, oh, that hand still isn't right. And you're redrawing that hand like 10 times, trying to get it just right. And suddenly you're like, you don't have time to worry about those you can't be that fussy. And I feel like my drawing ability increased more in that first year being in the industry than it had at 4 years at school, because suddenly I had to really step on the gas. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah. It's kind of like drawing before you can fully take in what it is you're even doing, in a way. I get like that with the, I'll do live caricatures of people, usually at goth clubs.
Wow.
And it's the same kind of thing where you just kind of draw faster than you can think about it, in a way.
Right. I think that's so gutsy, man. That's awesome. I've never had the courage to do live caricatures.
Oh my God. It's so fun because, like, I mean, the things that you have to notice when you're doing caricatures are things that if you said out loud, it would just be cruel.
Right. Yeah, right.
Your eyes are really close together.
Right.
But your chin is big, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so then you draw it and they just like laugh and they love it. And I've just always, unless somebody's like super drunk, but I've only had like one or two bad experiences where somebody was not happy.
Yeah. Do you work with a bodyguard?
No, I'm my own bodyguard.
You're your
man.
own bodyguard too. Jeez, you got to draw and then fend off people with your other hand, with your non-drawing hand.
Yeah. No, so there was one time where a guy was like part of a group and I was drawing the girls he was with, and he came up behind me out of nowhere and started whispering in my ear or something. And it was just like, hey, how about some space? Scared the crap out of me.
Oh my God. Was he wanting you to exaggerate certain features on the girls, or?
Probably. I mean, they were, drinking and stuff, and he was huge and just surprised me.
That's scary.
But it was all good.
Right.
But no, usually they're really good about it, and it's super, and it's fun too when it's people who like to dress up and like to, pay attention to the way that they look and everything, and that maybe they are marginalized in society. And so goths has been like a great little niche. Nobody's getting rich off of it, but it's been fun.
That's cool. That's cool.
Oh, I wanted to ask you though about having to hurry.
Yeah.
What would happen if you were falling behind? I've never really, because I'll do the same thing. I'll have like a job and I'll get caught up in something and I'll end up behind. Have you found that they just give you the boot immediately, or do they pull you aside and be like, you got to shape it up? Or
it's brutal. I'll be honest with you. I'm not the fastest guy, but I do find that there are only like, maybe in my experience, I've only met like maybe 3 or 4 guys that can actually keep up with a television schedule. Like if you're storyboarding or something like that. There are a few like brilliant people that can just crank out really nice drawings, and they draw very fast, but it's super rare, and I'm not one of those people. So for me, time is always the enemy. And I'm always trying to come up, with ways to manage it. Like going back to the Mickey Mouse shorts, like that's where, okay, on those, for instance, it's like we would come up with sort of a kernel of an idea in the story room with, 4 or 5 artists. We would brainstorm ideas and come up with a premise that felt good or whatever. And then you'd kind of once that got approved, you were kind of turned loose to really, in some cases, you'd have a beginning and middle and end when you'd come out of that story room. And in other cases, you wouldn't. You'd sort of have like the beginning of an idea, like a setup for a story. And then you'd go, it'd be like, okay, time to go. And you'd get in there. I would always sort of write, I always had to write a script because I don't draw fast enough to like figure it out, like to sort of take a wrong turn in the storyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have time to correct. So like I would take, legal pads and kind of like just write out what the dialogue would be and kind of figure out like, okay, this is the flow of it. Sometimes I'd be like, okay, I'm missing this chunk, but I'm going to go ahead and start on these other 2 chunks that I know are going to work. And then it'll give me more time to think about the part I haven't figured out yet.
Right.
So it's like that kind of thing. And then, you're just trying to draw it and pose it all out and make it work so that we would pitch all those things before the group. And so you'd want to have it all kind of fleshed out in a way, and you'd have it on your computer and almost do it like a PowerPoint where you'd step through the panels and act it out. And you wanted to have it like worked out enough that it like you could pitch it and people could feel like what you were going for.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, I mean, I would usually be a few days late. I would often get talked to about, you need to pick it up. Like, don't try so hard. You don't have to like work it all out. Like, I don't know. You'd always hear that kind of stuff. And it'd be like, you'd know that was bullshit because if you had to figure it out at some point, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you had to solve these problems. So I don't know. I always felt that there tremendous tension between the schedule and trying to actually produce something that works.
Something that's worth, somebody watching. Like it's hard if you're just really have the time for mediocrity only. That's not going to work out in the long run either.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like everybody kind of knows that, but then like, there's producers whose jobs it is, line producers whose job it is to like make sure that the sausage gets cranked out on time. So, they're sort of obligated to pull you aside and go like, man, come on.
Right.
Because they're getting in trouble too. So the whole system is rigged to like whip you like a mule, basically.
I feel like I would get in trouble because I would think like, well, it's just their job to pull me aside and tell me to hurry up, and then maybe I wouldn't hurry up enough, and then it's like, okay, well now you're fired because we told you to hurry up.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess I've always been just fast enough to not get fired.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
but slow enough to make my own life miserable to some degree.
Nice.
Where I'm like working late, working weekends, sometimes, not well, often actually. Because the other thing is like once you start on something, I don't know how you are, but like I'm like I really want to see the best version of that idea or joke or whatever. So I'm like, oh shit, really needs to be posed out more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I've also seen where it's like, if you don't put enough poses in the storyboard, then when it goes overseas and comes back, it's broken.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to add the necessary poses unless you do.
Right.
So it comes back from overseas and it's broken. So it's like you either fix it on the back end or you fix it before you send it. So that's just the reality of it,
Yeah. I mean, and is there going to be language barriers or?
There used to be. I mean, when I started in TV animation, Korea, like all the actual, you do all. So if anybody doesn't know how TV animation works, it's like you kind of, or this is the way it used to be. You do like the storyboard, you do background keys, which are like kind of small versions of the final backgrounds where you're basically figuring out all the color. You do character color, you do character designs. Did I say storyboard already? You do the storyboard, and in some cases you do the animatic, and then you send that all somewhere else, and they kind of assemble it all. And then, inevitably there's misinterpretation or things like that. But obviously, the more robust you can make that package that you send overseas, the better the result is when it comes back from overseas.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, what was the question?
If there was ever language barriers, but.
Oh, right. Yeah. Initially, we were sending everything over to Korea. So in that case, there was. But then as the animation industry's kind of evolved, then we started sending stuff on the Mickey shorts. We started sending stuff to Canada, to a studio called Mercury. And the thing that was great about that was all the people in Canada had kind of grown up watching the same cartoons that we had, and they watched Saturday Night Live and all this kind of stuff. So they had all these the same cultural touch points that we did.
Yeah.
So I think with Korea, it wasn't just the language barrier, it was also like a cultural barrier because they hadn't grown up, sort of digesting all of the Warner Brothers shorts and all of the Disney stuff and that sort of thing. So with sending stuff to Canadian artists, there were things that you didn't even have to explain because they just got the language that you were speaking in. And I don't mean English. I'm talking about sort of the cartoon language.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was Vancouver, you said?
Yeah. That was in Ottawa. Mercury is the name of that studio. And then we worked with a studio on Cuphead in Ireland that was called Lighthouse. And that was, sort of the same thing where it's like they sort of understood what you were going for to some degree, although they had done a lot of children's preschool animation, and we had to kind of bring them up to speed, getting them more into like comedy animation.
Yeah.
And like snappier timing, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I did that kind of stuff. My company that I was working for around 2000 got bought by a educational software company in Ireland. And so they sent me over there for I was there for a week and a half, and I was doing like little flash animations and kind of showing them the way we were doing our flash animations for the educational software. That was a sweet gig while I had it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Anytime you can get a trip out of anything, that's always a good that's a nice perk.
It was in the dead of winter. It was like I've never seen like freezing rain blowing sideways towards you, like horizontally right into your face.
Oh my God.
all the elements at the same time,
That sounds brutal. Yeah. I was over there. Actually, that was the other thing that happened. We were working on Cuphead. COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so we went through the whole lockdown through 2.5 years or whatever, however long COVID was. I mean, we went through the entire COVID process. I don't know if that's the right word, but we went through the
ordeal.
Ordeal. Thank you. That's a better word for sure. While we were still on Cuphead, but we were able to kind of set it up, began working on it. We had like a story room and a writer's room, and we were able to be together maybe for the first quarter of that production before COVID hit. And then it was all like I did the whole series sitting right here where you're seeing me in my this is in my garage attic here.
Oh, okay. Nice.
But it was sitting right in this chair and like reviewing animatics and taking pitches and the whole thing. So
that sounds all right though. Working from home, that's what
worked.
I'm doing.
It did work. It was a slower process. It's not the way I prefer to work, but but we got it done. We got it done, and we were all. I mean, there were like all kinds of live action productions and stuff had to shut down, and we were able to still keep doing it because we were just sharing a server and we could see each other's drawings and kind of draw over each other's stuff and still give notes and all that kind of stuff.
That's what I heard, that things were really pumping for animation because it could be done during COVID.
Right. I don't know if I'd use the word pumping, but
Yeah.
but happening for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are things? How are things now? I want to hear about Cuphead and stuff, though.
Yeah.
But how are things in the industry right now? I heard that things are slowing down.
Things are very strange right now. You always hear like we're in unprecedented times when it comes to like our politics.
Yeah.
But that also seems to be the case in the entertainment industry in sort of a broader way, but also in animation. So yeah, things have slowed down, and it also seems like studios that were doing TV, they used to do all the pre-production here in the States. That was sort of that process that I was just describing. But now more and more, I think, in order to cut costs, they're looking for ways to like partner with studios that are out of the country to bring costs down.
Yeah.
I don't really know how this whole thing is going to shake out, but it went from being like, when we started Cuphead, for instance, Netflix just decided that they wanted to be in the animation game. And so they were spending money like crazy. I mean, like crazy. And they like greenlit something like 40 different projects without really knowing anything about animation or having any infrastructure for animation. And that was amazing in some respects. And it was insane in certain ways too, because it's like you're trying to educate Netflix on how to do it at the same time you're barreling forward. We always use a metaphor of a train, where it's like you're in a train that's going 100 miles an hour and you're trying to like throw the track down in front of you.
Yeah.
So you don't derail and crash.
I think I've seen that on a Mickey cartoon, maybe.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, so it was nuts, but it went from like that, and then other studios are trying to compete with Netflix, and like so there was just all this stuff that was getting greenlit like crazy, and it seemed like the industry was just exploding. And then what sort of happened was that model really didn't work because it was kind of bananas, and a bunch of these shows got done. Netflix also didn't really believe in advertising as part of their model. So, a lot of these shows got done and they were really cool, but like no one even knew about them. But Netflix's thing was like, people will discover them if they're on the streaming service. Well, that didn't exactly work out. So at that time, they were like, we're not going to do animation anymore. It doesn't seem to be working the way we thought it was going to work. So they kind of shut things down. Then other studios sort of followed suit. And then there were like the strikes, the actors strike, the writers strike. So the industry kind of went through this like pretty severe cooling off period. And I think we're still trying to kind of pull ourselves back up from that. So yeah, I don't know. The future is kind of mysterious at the moment.
You may not be aware, but there is a mysterious connection between the classic cartoon character Betty Boop and the alternative rock band The Smiths. Join me, Roman Candelabra, as we explore this strange tale in Roman Candelabra's Mystery Moment! Any self-respecting list of the best cartoons of all time has to include the 1932 Betty Boop short, Minnie the Moocher. 49 years before the launch of MTV, this cartoon doubled as a music video for the Cab Calloway song, Minnie the Moocher.
Folks, now here's a story about Minnie the Moocher.
If you've seen this cartoon, it must be seared somewhere in the dark recesses of your childhood memories. How could we forget the image of Betty and her dog boyfriend Bimbo quivering in a cave as skeletons and spooks dance with a walrus ghost who's crooning his ode to Minnie, a sweet girl who's in love with an addict. Now let's rewind for a moment to the oft-overlooked beginning segment of the cartoon. It starts with Betty Boop moping at the kitchen table while being yelled at by a rambling father figure who turns into a phonograph, still squawking long after Betty has run off. She packs up a few of her belongings as she sings a weepy ragtime number.
They always pick on me. They never let me be. I'm so very lonely, awfully sad.
50 years later in Manchester, England, Morrissey, along with Johnny Marr, Andy Rourke, and Mike Joyce, come together to form a band called the Smiths, and quickly explode onto the post-punk alternative scene. Now here is the perplexing part. Having been born in 1959, Stephen Patrick Morrissey was not alive in the early 1930s, and yet, if we slow down Betty Boop's ragtime runaway song to what I believe is its original speed, the lyrics and voice on this little ditty become all too familiar.
They always pick on me. They never let me be. I'm so very lonely, awfully sad. It's a long time since you've been glad. But I know what I'll do by and by. I'll eat some worms and then I'll die. When I'm gone, you wait and see. They'll all be sorry that they picked on me.
So how can this controversial icon of alternative rock appear in a 1932 Fliescher Brothers cartoon? The answer may surprise you. Flying saucers, which are really, yeah, you guessed it, time machines. Hey, it's the midpoint of the show, and so this would be a perfect time to bring up that if you're enjoying the podcast, why don't you go ahead and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You may also have noticed that there are no ads on this podcast, and hey, you know what? I don't like to listen to ads either, so instead, it would be super cool if maybe you headed over to buymeacoffee.com/cheapchills and just drop a little something my way. No subscription necessary. It's like if I was playing guitar in the subway and that's my guitar case, which I would totally do, but I don't know how to play guitar. There's also Cheap Chills shop on Etsy, where you can pick up t-shirts and posters created by top-notch professional illustrator Ben Walker Story. Yeah. Thank you for your support. I think it's definitely, me included, a lot of people's dream to, be a creator of an animated show on Netflix, and you've done that. So tell me about how that all happened. Now, Cuphead was a game first?
Right, exactly. So while all that was going on, Netflix was deciding to go into animation heavily. Cuphead was a game that was based on 1930s animation, and the Moldenhauers, Chad and Jared, are the creators of that game, and they loved 1930s animation, and they decided to do a side-scrolling video game based on that 1930s animation. And they also decided, they made a commitment to that idea, and they animated everything. They hired animators and did things, in hand-drawn 2D animation. They painted all the backgrounds with traditional watercolor backgrounds. They really did a beautiful job of emulating all the styles and techniques of animation that would have been produced in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing about it. I'm not even a gamer. And I remember hearing about Cuphead before I ever saw anything. And I was like, huh, and of course I'm skeptical because I've like heard about other people that do, they want to do an homage to the 1930s and stuff, but it's like, yeah, there's a little bit of that in there, but it's not really exactly that. Like when I finally saw the Cuphead animation for the video game, I was like, holy cow, this looks amazing. They really pulled it off. It looks like if you did do a side-scrolling game in the 1930s, that's what it would look like.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so like they had all that great rubber hose technique and the timing and all that stuff. So anyway, yeah, it was such a big hit that Netflix wanted to do convert it into a TV show. And at that time, there was kind of like they were interviewing all these different showrunners from TV animation. It was kind of a who's who. I think they were like, they interviewed like 25 people and had 25 different showrunners come, and they would do pitches and the whole thing. And so I was like one of the people that ended up being approached. And somehow by hook or by crook, I convinced him that I was the right guy to go with. That's one of the greatest heists of my life. So
it was all a con. Wow.
What's that?
It was a con.
It was a con. I mean, it always feels like a con, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm really proud of the show that we ultimately made. So I felt like I was uniquely qualified in certain ways. I definitely love that stuff. And I just worked on the Mickey shorts where I was already thinking about like short form comedy and studying all those old cartoons. I was super familiar with them. And then there were a series of like, I met with Nickelodeon, not Nickelodeon. I met with Netflix and I pitched my ideas to the Netflix executive and she liked them. And then I had to pitch to CJ Kettler, who was in charge of King Features. And they were kind of controlling the property for MDHR, which was the Moldenhauer's company. Anyway, I went through these 3 stages. I felt like I was playing a video game, like where I just kept having to fight these different bosses. And finally, the Moldenhauers were the final boss. And I managed to get picked. So that's how that worked.
So you had the Mickey shorts as probably your main sort of portfolio piece. Was there other stuff that you had done that was kind of old timey style like that?
Not, but so a little bit. I'd done a lot. I'd done a lot of animation and stuff at that time. I'd worked on the movie Cool World. I had done stuff for like the Space Jam. I was an animator on Space Jam. And I'd created a show for Cartoon Network called Time Squad.
Yeah.
And I had sort of this dual career going for a while where I was working in TV animation as like a showrunner. This was before I had kids. And this was when I was younger and I could stay up all night long. But I would be a showrunner by day, and then I would direct animated TV commercials by night. And so the really fun thing about doing TV commercials was you could really experiment with style. So I had a lot of different styles that I had sort of played around with in the commercials. So I guess all that is a long way to say I had a lot of experience in that. I hadn't specifically tried to do anything that was older from that time, but I knew all the same stuff that the Moldenhauers were referencing. So like in a way they were the easiest people to pitch to because we both had this love for 1930s cartoons, and we could be like, oh my God, the Cobweb Hotel. Like I love the way that spider moved in Cobweb Hotel, or all the Fliescher Popeye cartoons and different Bimbo's Initiation was a Fleischer cartoon that was super surreal that I think, they pulled from, and Skeleton Dance that was a Disney cartoon. So we were sort of speaking that same language again. Like once we started talking, it was just like, oh my God, and I love this and that scene from that and blah, blah, blah. So even though, I didn't have anything that was as authentically 1930s as what they had done, we absolutely understood one another.
Yeah. I mean, Cuphead is just a beautiful, beautiful cartoon. I was just blown away when I put it on. So congrats on the show and just in general. It's amazing looking, and the animation, the backgrounds. I always trip out on like when backgrounds are just like gallery quality paintings, you haven't really seen that as much since, like your Looney Tunes days. I would trip out on just how well those are painted.
Right. Right. Yeah. We knew we wanted to try to do the 1930s watercolor background, the look of that. And the Moldenhauers had been able to pull it out with the game. But like, again, we're going in TV. So suddenly our schedule is accelerated probably 10 times what the Moldenhauers had to make the game. I think they took 10 years to make the game. And we made the whole series in 3 from the very beginning writing stages all the way through post-production and everything. So we had to find people that could basically like paint in watercolor, but they did it with digital tools.
So I was wondering if there's just like these perfect watercolor paintings that are frameable, or if it was a different process.
They're all they're digital, and you can print them. I've got one right here where I was working on the album cover. This is going to be the inside gatefold. You can see it, but I guess you're
nice, yeah.
Can't. But I'm like, so you could print them out. I mean, they do look absolutely like watercolor paintings. I think for the most part they would fool anyone. But they were painted digitally. But that said, all the artists that painted them were really versed in watercolor techniques. So they use the same kind of techniques of like layering and like having the way the paint bleeds and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They fully understood that.
There's a richness to them that I've never been able to figure out with watercolors.
Right. I mean, you have to be, I can't do it. I just hire people that can do it. So,
yeah.
but
networking.
We definitely got the right people. We definitely got the right team doing that. And same thing with like the storyboarding stuff. I mean, I have to say the crew that worked on the show was just phenomenal. Like it felt like the planets really aligned. I think part of it was because there were so many people in the animation industry that were such huge fans of the video game that we were able to get like a really A-list group of people. We had amazing directors. Clay Morrow and Adam Poloian were our directors on that, and they like worked very closely with the storyboard artist and gave them lots of guidance and notes and that sort of thing, and like did, they would do thumbnail drawings and all that kind of thing. And Deaky Deek was our head writer. He was amazing. Yeah, we just, like I said, it just aligned beautifully. Cosmo Segerson was our co-EP. He was like a huge fan of 1930s animation. So he was really great. And music, like he loved all like 1930s jazz and things like that. So he would often, show us things that were like, oh, if we're gonna do, a cartoon that has trains, let's all watch this cartoon, and then we would see them do this incredible stop motion train or something in that. So it was just a really great melding of the minds that made that possible.
Oh, I had a thought and it immediately vaporized. But when you said stop motion, it did remind me that I was watching a few Fliescher cartoons to prepare here, and it reminded me that a lot of them, they would have like, it must be stop motion, puppet style backgrounds.
Yes.
But then they would do some kind of, you'd almost call it a filter now, but they'd do something in the way that they filmed it where 2D stuff would gel right with the three-dimensional stuff. And I wonder how, Do you have any idea how they did that?
Yeah, that was a technique that was developed by the Fliescher Studios in the 1930s. And we definitely incorporated as much of that into our show as we could, because it was like that technique. It was something that they called it the stereoscopic process. And what they would do is they would build these models, and they would build them on a huge, like Lazy Susan, like a giant rotating platform, like the size of a table.
Okay.
And then they would incrementally rotate them. They would have it marked off, so it's like, they're moving at, like, I don't know, like a 16th of an inch. And then they would have cells that they would hang in front of the background, and they would line it up in such a way that the character would create the illusion that Popeye is walking along this street, and it's rotating at the same. That was the trick of it, to make it, it's like you want to make it look like Popeye's just walking down this three-dimensional street. And I remember seeing that stuff as a kid and just being like, what am I looking at? Like, I knew it wasn't just pure drawing. And it always kind of melted my brain. I loved it. And then, as I got older, I found out like what they were actually doing. And that's even more like, when you know how that it's done, it seems even crazier, because it's, it's so like painstaking and such a weird idea. And it was also it was just unique to the Fleischers. I think they patented it, and they would do it. And it only sort of happened in the 1930s. Like the Fliescher studio kind of rose and fell within that time period. So it was very unique to just the 1930s. And when we were doing Cuphead, we really wanted to sort of we wanted it to feel as much like a cartoon that would have been made in the 1930s from a technical standpoint as possible. So we were like, yeah, we got to do that for sure.
That's amazing. That makes so much sense that there's cells like literally hanging right in front of it, because then you could do like almost a matte painting where you wanted to also, right? You could really kind of paint right into the scene. I was watching one where it was a Betty Boop, and they were panning through an animal hospital, and there was like 10 animals in different beds and all kinds of stuff going on, but it was a 3-dimensional hospital.
Right.
Really cool.
Right. Yeah, there's a bunch, like the Fleischers did these 3 double-length color Popeye cartoons. The first one was like Popeye versus Sinbad. I don't know if you've seen it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like one of those cartoons. It's just, I think it's like in the everybody's top 20 cartoons of all time.
Was it like salami, bologna? Right?
Yeah, that one is actually the 3rd cartoon.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that one is Alibaba.
Okay.
Where Popeye is like Aladdin.
Right.
But yeah, it's loaded with that technique. The reason I brought that up is it has a lot of that stereoscopic process in it, especially the first one where it's like Bluto is Sinbad and he's on this island, and there's tons of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's where I first noticed it.
Yeah,
on those old Popeyes.
Right. And those are great because they're actually in color. Like most of the Fleischer stuff is black and white. So that has that like really rich, beautiful color in it. That was definitely a cartoon that we studied a lot.
That's amazing. Hey, do you ever listen to old-timey music while you're working on this stuff to kind of get you in that headspace?
All the time. All the time.
Who do you listen to?
There's Benny Moten was an artist that just was fantastic. His stuff felt really it's so lively, and it's like also like really fun instrumental stuff. So there was some of that I'd even used as like temp score on the Mickey cartoons, like when I was making the animatics and stuff, because it just has like a great bouncy animation feel to it.
Yeah.
So we listened to that. We listened to Fats Waller, Cab Calloway, obviously. and I would also, there would be compilations on YouTube. Like if you just go to like songs of the 1930s, you could put on these compilations and it would just play. But that music, for sure, informed the feeling of those cartoons. I mean, if you put that music on, you almost feel like you're in one of those cartoons.
Oh, totally.
And we also listened to the soundtracks of the Hal Roach stuff, Little Rascals, and Laurel and Hardy.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is really great. Hal Roach was the composer that wrote all that music. And that stuff is great because all those cues were kind of meant to be soundtracks for those cartoons. And so what he did was he made like sort of 30 different sort of mood pieces, and then they would just edit them in over multiple cartoons, or well, I call them cartoons. They were shorts. They were little comedy shorts, right?
Yeah.
But they would work again and again because he would sort of have one tune that was like happy-go-lucky, and then another one where it's like shit started to go wrong, like it was a little bit ominous or whatever. Yeah. So they're really great. You could just sort of we used them kind of in the same way in a temp score sort of way, as placeholders. Exactly. So that stuff is really, really fun to listen to. That's cool. Tons of other stuff.
Minnie the Moocher is my go-to karaoke song, just so you know.
Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. 1,000,000%.
Jelly Roll Morton. Do you ever listen to Jelly Roll Morton?
We listen to Jelly Roll Morton. Absolutely.
Or even like Firehouse 5+2 is fun.
Fantastic. Yeah, right. They did more of that Dixieland sound.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
Well, when people ask me if I like jazz, I'm like, well, what kind of jazz? Is it all Dixieland, Firehouse stuff? Sure.
Right. Yeah, there's a million different forms of jazz, right? Well, maybe not a million, but there's a bunch. There's a bunch. There's a lot of that early 1930s stuff, and then there's where it kind of turned into that freeform stuff that was happening in the 50s. I guess I'm less a fan of that. I do like melody and structure and that kind of
Great album covers, though. I mean, some of the best album covers of all time, at least.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. Yeah, it's really good. I kind of went backwards in time. When I was doing Time Squad, I was really studying all that really flat graphic stuff that was associated with like UPA, but there were also, like you said, tons and tons of album covers. Everything was kind of done in that sort of very stylized, flat graphic stuff. And I loved all that stuff when I was in my 20s and 30s in particular. And then I seem to be going back in time to the 1930s stuff where it was like drawing more dimensionally, and they hadn't really sort of hit on getting things more stylized and more cubist.
But it makes sense to like, I love digging further and further back into the deep cuts of the influences of my influences and going further and further back. So that totally makes sense.
Absolutely. You start to see how everything's kind of connected. One thing leads to another thing, and so on and so on.
There was one UPA that I loved. Was it Rocket Roger or something like that? What was that Rocket guy?
Oh, right.
So strange.
Right. Roger Ramjet.
Roger Ramjet.
Yeah.
That was so weird. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was like, I'm not sure if that was Jay Ward Studios. You know, Jay Ward did Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah.
And Natasha and Boris. Also Sherman and Peabody. So they had all those cartoons, and I think they were kind of influential at that time. And yeah, I don't know if they actually did Roger Ramjet or if it was something that was kind of responding to their style, but it's really great. That sort of really fast-paced narration and like they're just sort of doing a million. Sorry, go ahead.
His secret power was to take speed. He would like take a pill, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think what is it? Super Chicken did the same thing. He would take a pill. I always thought that was great too. I'm like, Popeye was kind of the same thing. He would he would take spinach and then suddenly he had this extra strength. I'm like, that just seems like he's taking drugs. And then Martin Scorsese put that in Wolf of Wall Street, and I was like, oh, someone finally did it. They
Yeah.
connection. Did you see that?
Right. Yeah.
Where Jonah Hill, they're snorting cocaine, and there's a Popeye cartoon playing in the background, and they're like, as they're getting like more wired, it's like the da 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 is
I don't
playing
know
in
if I
the
caught on
background.
to that.
Yeah, it's pretty
That's
awesome.
awesome. All right, so I got to ask, what does a guy do who wants to be, an animation creator, and you're not in LA? Is there an indie way around into breaking into the business, or do you just make YouTube videos and try to monetize?
That's a great question. I don't know that there's sort of one answer to that, but I do know that a lot of people have been making YouTube content. I mean, it seems like more and more, whether you're live action, going back to like people are putting stand-up comedy on YouTube. People are making animated videos because now with Flash, you can almost make your own cartoon completely, in your own studio. If you have like a mic, you can record the voices. You can if you can draw, you can pose out the cartoon. You can design all the color.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to do it if you're not in LA and you're not like actually able to go to studios and pitch things. The other thing I will say is I feel like almost all of the most important animation, that's the things that have kind of broke ground in animation, at least TV animation, were kind of done independently on the outside by someone, like South Park.
Yeah.
Those guys,
Mike Judge
with Beavis and Butthead, even Cuphead. I mean, it was done like outside. Those Chad and Jared Moldenhauer weren't animators. They weren't in the animation industry. They just were fans of that particular style, and so they hired all those animators themselves and created Cuphead independently of the studio and the studio system. And I will say, like, all of that stuff, I feel like probably would not have gotten made if you just pitched it as an idea. I think it would have been too weird. It would have been like, I think people don't get it until they see it. And then you're like, oh, okay. So I think having like a proof of concept is a great thing. Even if you were going to even if you did want to pitch something to Nickelodeon, if you'd made this little short film and you went like, here's what it is. This is what this character sounds like. This is what these two sound like when they're talking to each other. I think that helps people envision things in a way that they're just not going to get from a storyboard pit or even like a pitch deck.
Yeah.
Where you go, this guy's a cat, this guy's a dog. They love each other, but they fight all the time. You gotta make something. Yeah, if you make something, then they're like, oh, okay, I get it. I see. So I think, yeah, that's not a bad way to think for sure. And even if it's like you kind of know Flash animation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been taking advantage of character animator as much as possible. It's one of those temptresses where you're like, oh, once you build a character, then all your content is instantaneously made. And it doesn't quite work out that way as much as I would have hoped. But I've been trying to take advantage of character animator. Have you seen that at all? Have you played with that?
I'm not familiar with it. No.
It's motion capture based. So
okay.
It's more like doing puppetry. You make your character and you make all of the different head positions and expressions that you want, and you can make it super basic. I've animated just an object sometimes, because you can bring an object into character animator and then use the webcam and make it kind of bob and react to what you're doing. But if you can build up a character as much as you want to. So it's kind of cool if you want to be able to make stuff that is kind of a quick turnaround once you've made the character. It's just hard to, now I'm going to make a new character, and it's going to take you forever to make all the art assets in order to have this guy have a buddy, you know?
Right.
But yeah, I want to get back into doing the Flash kind of stuff more. And just mixing in some mixed media type stuff of mixing in, like, I'll use movie clips from public domain movies or movie trailers and stuff like that to kind of fill things out a little bit and have something to talk about.
Yeah, well, that sounds fun. That sounds like a good idea. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, when you're working independently, you learn to be very innovative.
Right.
And creative and resourceful, right? Because you kind of have to be.
Yeah. So just it's fun to I don't know, figure out the hustle as you go along and convince your wife that it's going to turn into something someday, right?
That's right. You got to believe.
You just got to make stuff and put it out there.
That's right. You got to believe. You got to believe, man.
Yeah. What's going to happen next? I don't know. Something's going to happen.
That's right.
What's going to happen next for you? What are you doing?
Let's see. I'm just finishing up. I did. So there's going to be a vinyl album for all the songs and the music that we did for Cuphead. So I've been working on. I illustrated the cover and all the artwork for the whole album. That's coming out later this year. I don't know exactly when. We don't have a specific release date on that yet. And the other thing I was working on was the art of the Cuphead Show book. There was an art of the Cuphead Show video game. It's about like 250 pages. And they wanted to make a book of the artwork from the TV show. So it's coming out through Dark Horse.
Oh, nice.
Deaky Deek, our head writer, interviewed pretty much everybody that worked on the show. And so the book is kind of an oral history of the making of the show and like the different challenges that we came up against and, how we problem solved together and that sort of thing. But it's all kind of told through interviews. And then it's loaded with tons of character design stuff and like inspirational artwork, a lot of stuff that you don't see in the show. You see like a lot of like inspirational sketches and all that kind of stuff. And that's coming out in early September.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I love Dark Horse. They do such great titles and art books too, obviously. Is it going to be like a hardcover kind of thing, huh?
It is. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And Andrea, who's the art director, and myself did a big wraparound cover for the book. Like it starts on the front and goes all the way around to the back cover and everything. So that's all brand new artwork. But so that's coming out in early September.
Can't wait to see that. Nice. Well, dang, dude, I'm so thankful and appreciative that you were willing to spend some time with me this morning and talk about old-timey cartoons and stuff.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Sounds like we love a lot of the same stuff.
This has been the Cheap Chills Show. For more spooky fun, follow us on Instagram at Cheap Chills Fan Club. Thank you for listening.